Hi, welcome to the latest episode of The Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Noel, and we have some returning guests. Yeah, some people do come back, sort of glutton for punishment, they're otherwise known as. Laura and Barry and Laura Ash, I better say. Who are rejoining us, and we're going to catch up with what they're doing at the moment. And they're both very interesting people that I saw at a conference and on sort of workplace health and well-being issues, and both are fitness and health experts, and have a very interesting personal background, I think, because they both come from the criminal justice background, and so all of that is very interesting to me, because I'm aware of how stressful and difficult those environments are, and anybody who can come out of that sort of thinking about their health and well-being is a smart cookie, as far as I'm concerned. A lot of my mates don't get that far. They get medicaled out and that's it, and then they don't think about their health and well-being at all. But we're going to catch up with them both and get their story and what they're currently working on, which is lots of things around being trainers and health and fitness trainers, but also looking at issues of burnout, which, if you've ever had it, is pretty horrific. So if you can avoid it, it's a really sensible thing to do. So hopefully we'll get some tips on that from a couple of experts. That's enough for me. Laura, Barry, Laura, welcome back. How you doing?
We're really good, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, we never know. Nobody ever knows who to put first, and I'll just say to them, just pick me first, and that won't be a problem.
Was it age before beauty?
Something like that. Oh.
You've also got alter egos, haven't you? Your sort of heroic costume alter egos.
Yes. Yeah.
We do a lot of charity work with the superhero, our superhero life. So I'm Kal-El or Superman, and this is Diana Prince or Wonder Woman.
Yes. Yeah, so we've been actually this weekend we're with Demelza House, who is a children's local hospice here in Kent, in Sittingbourne, and they're celebrating 25 years of helping families and children with illnesses, whether they be terminal or sort of
very tough
ones, yeah. And so we're with them this weekend, and we've actually just been accepted by Great Ormond Street to be volunteers as well there. So we shall be putting our outfits on and going and spreading some love and smiles at Great Ormond Street, probably be in 2024 now.
Great. And you're off to New York soon, I think, as well, aren't you, to Comic-Con, to sort of wow them over there as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
So hopefully while we're out at the Comic-Con out in New York, we're going to hopefully get into some hospices or some children's charities out there as well to spread some smiles, because we got a saying, it's a smile and pass it on, and we've just I got 3 million on the wall behind me, and it's about 3 million smiles. We've got to just keep pushing them out.
How much you've raised so far? About 3 million in total.
It's all about smiles. I've done a charity beard shave back in, was it 2022?
That's when we very first started,
and I raised £4,500 to shave my beard off with that one. So that was the big one.
And the thing is, I've seen you both in your costume, and they, like a lot of people who do this stuff aren't that great in their costumes, but you two actually are. It's like stunning.
We try our best.
We absolutely love it. And do you know what, Noel? It's really interesting because it's quite an honor for us to put those outfits on, because you embody somebody's idol or someone's childhood, and when you put that on, I personally see it's a lot of responsibility. So here's a wee story for you. This didn't happen to us, but this is just the impact of what maybe someone like Barry, who dresses as Superman, has. So there was a small child that got lost at a Comic-Con up in Manchester. And his parents had always told him, if you get lost, go and find somebody that you trust. And guess who he found?
Superman.
A Superman cosplayer, exactly. Now, if that's not responsibility right there, I don't know what is. And so for us, when we put those costumes on, it's just, we have a bit of fun with it, but we also see it as kind of like a huge honor for us to be, be in them. So yeah.
That's great, because I think a lot of people just think about it as silliness and stuff like that, but actually a lot of people who sort of play these characters and take these roles on take it quite seriously and are very socially engaged, in my experience. And like there's guys I know who, I don't know them personally, but there's guys who dress up as superheroes who do the window cleaning for hospitals and stuff like that. And it's, it's just absolutely heartwarming to see that, people are willing. And I think you're right. These heroic characters, I love all this Marvel stuff, I have to say, the whole Marvel universe thing. Yeah. I know DC, that's what you are. Sorry, Barry.
Yeah. I was ready to jump in then.
Agree with me, but I'm a great fan of it. But I, from a very early age as a kid, just talking about what you're talking about, I identified with these larger than life characters. And I think all kids, like I was, and all kids, we process our stuff through those characters. We project a lot of our stuff, particularly if kids are struggling, like the kids in hospitals, etc. It gives them a way of dealing with the difficulties and making sense of them. So, yeah, I get that. It's interesting because you've been, if you like, real life superheroes as well, historically. And I don't think you think of yourselves in that way, but certainly in your previous careers in the criminal justice system, you were doing really tough stuff on behalf of society, and probably not getting the same adoration and thanks, I don't imagine.
No, I'm just thinking about Friday and Saturday night, stood outside nightclubs getting spat at. Yeah, it's probably not the same.
So, but you were sort of very engaged, both of you, public servants, dealing with doing work that is really tough work. Do you want to say what it was?
Yeah. I was a prison officer and Laura was a police officer. And it was really funny because I would have convicted prisoners coming into me and I'd be doing the inductions. They'd come into the gym where I'd be working at within the prison service and they'd say, Officer Ash, where do I know that name from? And I was like, oh, here we go. Are you related to a PC 11985 Laura Ash? Nope, don't know her at all. No, don't know her at all. And literally, they'd get nicked by Loz, come through the system and come into the prisons. And yeah, I had to section myself away from that. So, because otherwise I would have been in, I wouldn't say bullied, but they would have,
it would have been
picked me up.
You wouldn't have been their favourite.
No, and I'm not allowed to be their favourites.
It's hang on, I've got updates trying to update on my computer. I better stop them. Go away, updates.
Don't worry.
Always the way. Plenty of them.
Like, absolutely, at the most inopportune moments. But it's glad to see you were keeping in the family. Is that how you knew each other, or did you know each other before? What was the story?
Oh, well,
we met each other. I used to work in a local leisure centre, and this girl come in, or this lady come in, and I'd done a fitness test, and we started talking, and the fitness test didn't happen. We just got really into the conversation, and it started to evolve, and we started to connect, and I thought, there's something special here. So obviously, asked her out on a date. She said no. And then she come back in the next day, and she said, can I take you up on office? We went out for a drink. But the interesting story here...
That was when we were 21 and 22.
21 and 22.
We're now 43 and 45, so we've been together 22 years.
Okay, wow.
The real interesting thing is, when we started dating, we've been dating about 3 or 4 weeks, really, wasn't it? And you start having the conversations. Where did you go to school? Where did you hang out? And we found out that we went to the same preschool.
No.
And we used to play with each other at that preschool, the YMCA. And I said, yeah, I went to the YMCA back in Dover. It was that. And I used to play The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man with this girl and one of my best friends, Luke. And Loz said, I used to play The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man with these two boys. So it was me and my friend Luke and Loz. So we used to play with each other when we was 3 and 4 at the preschool. So that's where we first met, went our separate ways, and then fate, the universe, whatever you want to call it, has brought us back together, and we are here today doing what we do.
too, but that's quite an extraordinary story. I mean, that's really amazing.
But the fact that you said, about superheroes being intrinsic in your life when you were younger,
Yeah.
the fact that, really when Barry and I very first met, we were playing, superheroes. And now at the age of 43 and 44, about 40 years later, we're doing it now. So it's kind of gone full circle, really. We just celebrated our 18th wedding anniversary, didn't we?
Yeah.
So
Well done. So you met at this fitness centre.
yes, it's your
It's at school previously, but not. I'm realizing you start a relationship, and you start dating. I mean, it's interesting. I think, is that you, Laura, that you didn't say yes initially? You went away and thought about it, and then came back. Is that your style? Is that how you are as a person?
So I was kind of just coming out of a bad relationship, and I didn't really know what I wanted. And if I was honest with you, I was scared to commit to anything, because I'd been hurt, and so I was worried, and I was thinking, what do I do? Do I kind of give myself a bit of a break, or do I just kind of open up to the universe and basically go for it and surrender? And I chose the surrender bit, to be brave and just go for it. And then, look what happened.
Worked. Fantastic. But were you in the police at that time, Laura, or not?
No, you was the assistant manager of the sports centre.
Yeah.
And I was actually, what was I doing?
He was working for Mission Aviation.
I was temping. I was just temping,
Times.
living my life, as a young whatever.
Yeah.
I was temping for Mission Aviation Fellowship, which was a charity organisation here in Folkestone. And yeah, the kind of, we met, and it's all gone from then. You decided to join the prison service first before I went into the police, because
Think about that.
well, we got we were together a few weeks, and Barry announced to me that he was going to Australia for 6 weeks with his mum.
Okay.
And so I said, well, can I not come along? So I just kind of wheedled my way in on that trip, basically, Noel. And we had an amazing time.
Landed in Australia. Loz was a great one for spending her money.
I did.
We landed in Darwin Airport. She bought a didgeridoo and a telescope. The biggest things to carry around Australia when we're backpacking.
Yeah, but you did well with it, Baz. You did well with it.
Interesting. The didgeridoo I get, because you'd want to learn how to play it, because there'd be a talking point and all that. But why a telescope? What was that for?
Because the places that we visited now in Australia I've always been a stargazer, was some of the most phenomenal. Yeah, and there's no light pollution when you go down to Wave Rock, when you're at Ayers Rock, do you know what I mean? It's just phenomenal. And anyway, on that trip, that's when Barry proposed to me. So we got engaged then on that trip. And then we came back and we were like, we want to buy a house and everything. And that's when you then decided to join the prison service to basically earn some more money to service me, I suppose.
Income to keep her in the style she's become accustomed to.
Yeah, when I was in the fitness industry, you couldn't afford a house on the wages. It was minimum wage, probably about £7,000 a year I was bringing in. You couldn't afford it. So a person walked in the gym who was a PTI in the prison service, and he says, you'll be straight on like £20,000. I doubled my wage. Yeah. And I thought, brilliant. So I spent 3 years walking the landings because that back in them days, you had to learn your jail craft by walking the landings. So I had to do that before I specialised as a PTI in the prison service.
Were you worried about it, Laura? Did it worry you, or you were okay with it?
I mean, yeah, I was concerned each time that he went into work, because you never quite know what's going to happen. But I knew that he had a really great team around him, of people. You're not unfortunately now I think it's a bit different, because you're not opening the doors with so many. Yeah.
I really feel sorry for people in the prison service now, because I'm not going to make a party political point, but this government have really messed it up. It's like
they're so understaffed. That's the big problem. They are so understaffed at the moment, and it's you can't manage a jail without the numbers to actually manage the prisoners
Well,
in
what
there.
did you end up on?
I used to unlock the wing with 2 officers per landing. We had a desk officer who would run the numbers of the jail. We had a cleaning officer that would run the cleaning party. So you're looking at 2, 4, 6, about 12 officers. You had 2 SOs and a PO, so senior officers and principal officers. When I left, there was 1 member of staff to a wing some days. I
Exactly.
was opening up the jail with about 100 prisoners in there. I opened up the gym with about 100 prisoners. And what can you do? You can't manage that. You just have to sit back and go,
Whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
And it becomes horrific. I think they have become really scary places now, and very little hope of any sort of rehabilitation. I think if you go into the system now, you're just going to get lost, sadly.
But what I will say, when I was there, I had a great time working with some of the prisoners. And now we went to Demelza last weekend. Was it last weekend? Weekend before last? And one of my ex-prisoners, who was an orderly for me working in there, he come up to me and he's told me exactly what he's doing with life. He's back on the road. He's living a life with it. His kids is a priority. He was a good lad, and now he's back in society, giving back to society as well. So there is some good guys out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a house just across from me, which is National Reoffenders Association, and the people who go there mostly. I mean, there's been 1 or 2 people that are just idiots, because there are in life. But the people that are there, and they're getting on with things, they're getting their lives back together, they're being given another chance, and they're grabbing it with both hands. So, but I have to say, I mean, we saw it with probation, and then with the prison service, just stripped bare and sort of like not good. And it's a sad thing. It's one of those, there's a saying, isn't there? It's a measure of society is how it treats its outcast, its prison population, effectively. And by that measure, we are failing as a society at the moment, I think, very sadly. But is that what but that's now, then, there are lots of good people like yourself, because, I don't know if I told you, but I was working in forensics for a long time as a psychotherapist. So I had worked in the secure estate, as it's called more generally, so locked hospitals, but also prisons. I did work in places like Grendon, which at that point was an extraordinary place. I don't know what it's like now, but Grendon was, I think, the only therapeutic prison in the UK at that point. So people would apply to go there. Prisoners would apply to go there. It was so highly regarded.
Wow.
Seriously. I mean, it was one of those, as you know, even no matter how well you get to know people on the inside, you can't really trust people because things can go wrong. And so you're careful. But it was one of the few places where I actually would go into somebody's cell without an escort and be quite happy and comfortable with talking to people, and so things like that. So I don't know what it's like now, but certainly it used to be sort of a very forward-thinking place that had people that knew they were going to die in prison, but they wanted to change anyway.
That's good.
But tried to prove anything to a parole board. They just come to that point in their life where they knew they just change, and which is great. But you were watching him go in and out of the prisons. I'm guessing, Barry, were you sharing what was going on and stuff like that, or were you shielding?
As much as you can, really, because 99% of the time it's boring.
Yeah.
You unlock them, they have their breakfast, they go to work or education, or they go back to their cells. Then they all come back for lunch and they all go back out for the afternoon. They come back in again and they go to bed. Yeah. It's pretty boring. But sometimes it's good to get some stuff off your chest when I come in from work. But I know Loz, when she was in the police, she was dealing with a lot of the same things out on the streets as I was dealing with inside. So
when did you get involved in the police, Laura? Well, how long after that?
It was literally the year after it.
6 months.
Yeah, when you apply for the police, you have to do a fitness test. you have to go and do maths and English tests. You have to do role kind of play tests, that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in fact, I failed my fitness test now on the push and the pull. So that is what got me into fitness, because before I was never sporty, not like this one, you know, who was born with dumbbells in his hands. That got me into my fitness, actually, having to do the push-pull test. But
to the police at that point, do you think, Laura? What was it?
Sorry?
Attracted you to joining the police at that point?
So I wanted to feel like I was really helping, because the jobs I were doing, I just didn't feel fulfilled in them.
Yeah.
And I wanted more of a secure wage. That's one thing. I wanted a good pension. That was another thing. But the other thing I really wanted was just to really help out in the community, to feel like I was doing my part. And I wanted more of a tactical route in my career, Noel. So I wanted to do section, where you see, you know, them going about every day, blue lights, that kind of thing. Then I wanted to move on to the TAC team, which is where you would do warrants and raids and public order. And then I wanted to move into firearms. And then I wanted to finish up in the dog unit. So I knew how I wanted my 30-year career to go. You know, I had it all planned out, basically. And you know, I was like, I remember getting the phone call, because I was still temping, and money was tight for us. You know, we just bought this house, and I got a phone call from Barry about 4:30. I was at my temping job, and he said, make sure you answer the next phone call, because it's Kent Police. And I was like, okay, like that. And I can feel myself getting emotional now. And I remember taking a phone call, and I went, and it was kind of like a change room area, and they said, you've been accepted, you've got a space. And I've got goosebumps, and literally the sense of relief of like, I got through, we're going to be okay money wise, I've got a job, that level of security, it just felt amazing to get that. Do you know what I mean? It was, because it was such a long ordeal, wasn't it?
And then you got diagnosed with bipolar.
And then I got diagnosed with bipolar and OCD. So
Got to thank the police for there, haven't you?
exactly.
Were you? I mean, obviously you were happy for Laura, and it was both of you wanted this, but you must have been a little bit anxious as well, surely, about the idea of.
I was excited, because I think in these types of jobs, you learn more about the public, you learn about people, but more importantly, you learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
When you are confronted by an angry person, or whatever the situation, a death, suicide, whatever you're faced with, you learn so much about yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to step up to the mark. And I think when you step up to the mark, you step out your comfort zone, this is where you start learning about yourself. Yeah. When you start developing as a human being. So I was up for lots being a police officer. There was some funny stories you come back with. I was driving back from work one day down the motorway, the motorway went from 3 lanes into 1 lane, and there was this police officer sweeping the floor, and I drove past. I knew it was her. I said, "Why did you do that at home?" And every other police officer put down their tools and just stared at me.
Yeah, I was in a secondment to traffic that week, wasn't I? Yeah.
Right. And
I was pleased for Loz to get the job, because I knew she would grow as an individual.
But I think you had confidence in me. My dad didn't want me to join.
Okay.
He was like, I don't want you to be a police officer. And I think he was just worried about me. I've always been someone that can take care of myself. And I think you felt confident that I could take care of myself. 100%. And you were like, yeah, she'll be absolutely fine. You know, I get on with people. I've got great communication skills. I don't back down easily. Do you know what I mean? This kind of thing. So you knew.
But I mean, it is true though, as a first responder, which is what that role is, along with fire and ambulance and so on. You get to witness and see things that are at times difficult and challenging, of course.
Yeah. I remember my first sudden death we went to, and literally I couldn't get the image of the person out of my head for weeks and weeks. When I went to bed and I went to sleep, that's the only thing I could see. And I do remember that to be one of the most toughest ones that I dealt with, definitely.
It's not unusual for people in first responding jobs to end up with post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, because of witnessing horrific things, or because of facing people who are threatening and violent and frightening as well. So, and particularly that.
I've always stood by the fact that I don't think anybody should be single crewed, daytime or nighttime. I don't think it should happen, and it does happen. And I know people who have pitched up to calls, because you can't, you can't get to a call and be like, oh, I can't really go in. You just have to do it, right? They will say don't go in, but if you've got someone screaming in there and you're outside, you're then going to have to justify, maybe if that person dies, why you didn't go in there. But it's just something you do out of instinct.
Yeah, don't you?
Yeah, and I know so many officers who have been in that situation, and they have been brutally, attacked. And I just don't think people should be single crewed. I really don't.
I totally agree. But also I'm wondering about, in both your contexts, I know, Barry, one of the things that you've discussed is and explained is, and this is what they try to do, is reduce risk in environments. So within a prison, you can reduce risk, can't you? It's a managed environment. Within the public, you can't as much, but you can do it as much as you can do it. But what was the culture, even when something frightening would happen, sort of institutionally, organizationally? How was that viewed? How did you feel as an individual? Was it reasonable to talk about it, to have feelings? Did people understand, or were you expected to shoulder it and just carry on? What was your experience when the proverbial did hit the fan, as it were?
We had dark humor.
Right.
This is how we got over it. If we would have a situation, self-harmer, I had a person who cut himself from bottom of his sternum down to his belly button and emptied his stomach out with a plastic knife. But the only way we can do about it, it sounds horrible. You deal with the situation, you get that bagged up, put away, do the paperwork side of it, but then you have a laugh and a joke about it, because it helps you process what you've actually been through. If you kept that inside of you and kept it really serious, then the PTSD will come out and it will start haunting you. Yeah. So we called it dark humor, but we would have a laugh and a joke about it and bring that level of seriousness down about it after the situation was dealt with.
Yeah, and I think you got to remember, we're talking like...
Just before you go on, but there's the really interesting clip on social media at the moment of a police officer in America making a joke about a pedestrian having been killed by another police officer by accident as they were driving. And it's, out of context and all that sort of stuff. I'm not commenting on what actually was happening, but you're making me think about that dark humor thing. I guess people don't understand that. And I do, because I remember when I worked on locked wards with people who were dangerous and things would happen. Yeah, I understand that.
I think the dark humor has its place.
Yeah,
it's like I wouldn't walk down the street with another officer and we'd have the dark humor together, because somebody would overhear that, they would misinterpret it. We'd only do it in our office or in the prison itself, where it's just staff members who was involved with that situation. It wouldn't be, and then once it's done, it's bagged, it's put away, then we get on with the next job that comes up.
And I think memories now as well, like when Barry and I were in, we're talking, gosh, 20 years ago.
We started 20 years ago, so Rock Solid's been 10 years now, hasn't it?
Rock Solid's been 10 years, and then Barry and I were both in for 10 years as well. So we're talking like 20 years ago. And so it very much was that humor was a way of dealing with it, or you just go, well, that was the job. What's the next job? Because sometimes you don't even get a chance to think about these things, because you might go to a cot death and it's traumatic, but then the next thing you know, you're going to a domestic violence, and then you're going to a shoplifting. Do you know what I mean? And so I think back then it was a case of using, dark humor, definitely, but not to the detriment of the intention of upsetting anybody or being, anything like that. Nowadays, I think with everything that's happened in terms of like Wayne Couzens, and even when I was starting to come out of, you know, the job, there was much more focus on actually helping officers be able to process the emotion. And I think nowadays there is more of an emphasis on, look, if this was upsetting, then there are policies in place for you to now go and speak to somebody.
Yeah.
I don't personally feel that was there when I was around like 20 years ago, but I do think that they are noticing that, you know, officers, even just doing shift work is a huge strain on someone's mental and physical health. And even just doing that job can affect relationships and mental health, emotional health, that kind of thing.
Well,
So
with
there is more.
such evidence to show that shift work is a disaster
Yes.
for your psyche, an absolute disaster. I mean, one of the worst things you can do to yourself, really, is a shift, particularly if you're doing rotating shifts. It's sort of slightly better if you are long-term nights and stay on it, but when you do these patterns where you have to do nights and then you have to, and sometimes you have those the 24 hours is broken into 3 sections type shifts.
Yeah,
that was me.
early, late and nights.
Yeah, and I think that's what contributed to the bipolar and my erratic moods, definitely,
because it upsets your circadian rhythm. Every living creature on this planet follows the circadian rhythm of the planet.
Yeah.
And it's our internal body clock. And when we move out of alignment with the whole universe and the world's clock, then everything goes sort of AWOL. And we're struggling to always trying to fight against that. And that's what causes a lot of problems.
Well, I was lucky when I was in the NHS doing all this work. Because I wasn't a nurse, I didn't have to do shifts. I was a therapist. So but the nurses were, I don't know how they did it. I mean, they would do 12 hours on, and I don't, you know, it's just not human, I don't think, to be honest.
They still did it with the care and attention that they started the shift with. And I think that is phenomenal. When I've been to hospital seeing people.
A disturbed night's sleep. You should see me in the morning. I'm horrible.
I'm the same.
Absolutely pathetic. And I'm watching people, they'd spent 30 years doing these types of shifts and they were always lovely. That, you know, but you know, but I also think, and I want to come back to this culture, because there is a lot of talk now about the culture of the criminal justice system and whether it has become a bit more warped, and it does feel like it's somehow become darker. And I wonder if that is, and you may not have an answer to this or even want to speak to it, but I wonder if that is because it's been so stripped bare of resources. I mean, you know, you've got the stuff going on in the Met at the moment, which needs to happen, the clearinghouse post Couzens, because of the growth of what they call the canteen culture and stuff like that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one. I mean, it's sort of... The Met have been difficult for a long time. I think they've been struggling for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to remember as well, I think you have to be able to support officers, you know, within these roles. You cannot just expect a human being, especially someone that's 18, to come into a role and then them just to get on with it, seeing a cop death or go into a brutal, even just going and seeing a post-mortem, you know, that can really affect somebody. And I think you can't just get people in and just get them trained up and then off they go. If they're going to be experiencing traumatic stuff, that might trigger something, and there needs to be a level of care for that officer, not just seen as a number. You know, I think that's really important.
I have seen, I know the impact of trauma functioning, long-term trauma functioning, and it's also, there's an interesting thing to think about, and it's almost like you two embody this in some way, or used to anyway, when your previous roles, that you are sort of arresting the people that are many of whom would have had this type of trauma response that we're talking about, and then ended up in the prison service. And Barry, you were working with them, and then it was also it was traumatizing yourselves as police officers and as prison officers, and the whole system was, of all the people in it, were getting damaged. And to be honest, you know, the army wouldn't tolerate what you lot had to tolerate without this. But because at least in the army, they recognize how dangerous it was and how much support you need to give to people that you're putting in harm's way. And I think we've been playing catch up with our sort of public servants in these areas of work. And I saw a really interesting graphic. I don't have it on me at the moment, but I might send it to you guys because you'd be really interested in it. And it's a graphic looking at in the US, and I think it's also applicable to the UK and Europe. But it has two graphs, two axes, one that goes like that, one that goes like that, and it's about mental health and prison numbers.
Okay.
And the people in the mental health hospitals since 1940, it goes like that. In prisons, it goes like that.
Wow. Interesting.
The numbers in psych ward have dropped.
Yeah.
Been a 1-to-1 increase in the numbers in the prison system.
Wow.
Wow.
It's a startling picture. It's an absolutely startling picture. And I would say, as a mental health professional, that I have seen that happening.
Yeah.
Seen that happening. And my experience when I was working as a clinician in the secure estate, and it's not a justification for dangerous behavior. Always people used to think, if you're a psychotherapist with murderers, does that mean you're trying to justify them being murderers? No, the task is to make somebody safer, and always public safety comes first in all this work. I don't need to tell you, you know, public safety is paramount. Nothing is done without viewing public safety, and you do MAPA and all that sort of stuff if you're thinking about releasing somebody who's dangerous, and multi-agency public protection, people who don't know. So dangerous people are just thrown out. Sort of like, there's work. Well, there was work that used to happen, but without a doubt, I would say, and I don't know what your experience was, but every single person I came across who was an offender had awful life experiences.
Yeah. The majority of
Life.
people I dealt with, they was brought up in the gangs orientated. Their parents, if they knew their parents, was either in or out of prisons or around the drugs and the alcohol, and there was no stability within their upbringing. But the only stability they got was being inside, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that again, that's not a justification for the behavior. That is what made them dangerous.
Yeah.
We want them walking the streets, to be honest. So
even if you look at, when I moved over to counterterrorism, one of my first roles was looking at the threat of Al Qaeda, and very much so that was about how we can stop radicalization. And, to radicalize somebody, it would be somebody who had been shunned. It would be somebody who didn't have a very good upbringing. So again, it's preying on that type there that they could then radicalize, and, well, we all know how that ends. Do you know what I mean? For some of it. Yeah. And so, you can see that there's these little patterns, not only that we can see, but people who want them on their gang or whatever can see as well.
It's what makes somebody vulnerable to radicalization. I remember when that program came out, actually, that public safety program. I forget what it was called. It was Prevent, wasn't it?
So ours was, when I was in there, it was called Op Lagos, but that was more of a local one that I was kind of working on under. And that was my remit, to go into local mosques, to engage with youth groups, just to really make sure that we had an eye and a check on anything that was going on in the area. We live in the southeast, so we've got Folkestone and Dover, and we've always got, a lot of migrants coming through. So for us, it's, really important that we was talking to schools and colleges and, as I say, some of the local mosques and that sort of thing, just to really get a handle on anything that might have been happening there.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting stuff. Let's move the narrative on a little bit, though.
Okay. We could talk all day.
Actually could about this stuff, because I think it's so relevant to today. And I'm thinking about Dover and the small boat crossings and nutty response to it, which is not a response, is it, at all? It just exacerbates and makes everything worse. What's these idiots in leading the Home Office. I don't know what she's doing, to be honest. But I don't want to go there because
No, let's not go there because
spend 24 hours discussing that. There's such poor quality of leadership in this country at the moment. The cowardice is extraordinary.
We're scared of upsetting people. I think that's the problem. A strong leader needs not worry about upsetting people. They need to do what's right for the greater good. But I think we're worried about upsetting lots of people and getting a bad name for ourselves.
Yeah, and we need to sort of resolve some of these issues about our international relationships, because that's the only way you resolve these things. Having kicked people in the teeth, we're now worried and thinking, why are they not trusting us? Well, it's like it's obvious. Anyway, put that to one side. Let's move it on. So you're in the prison service, you're in the police, you're in these high pressure jobs. But also you're embracing them as decent human beings, wanting to help, managing to help as well. And then I guess a sort of something quite strange and almost catastrophic happens, doesn't it, to break this sort of plan? And that was you start to become quite severely psychiatrically ill. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, I remember how it all first started. You've known me for a little while now. I'm very happy-go-lucky, and this kind of thing. All of that was kind of knocked out of me. I was very emotional. I remember just putting my stab vest on and bursting into tears, and I was like, "What is going on?" I was having these really weird breathing patterns where I was like panicking, and that's all I knew it as. I was waking up in the middle of the night, having nightmares. I was really low, really just not very happy. These are how I would say I didn't have much energy, couldn't be bothered to, do my makeup or anything like that. And my sergeant noticed, and he pulled me in the office and he said, "Look, Loz, there's something not right. You're not your usual self. I want you to go to the doctors." And I said to him, "What's the doctor's going to do? I'm just a bit tired. It's because I'm doing shift work. Just got to get used to it." He went, "No, I want you to go." So I went, "Fine." I went to the doctors the next day.
Must have been quite severe if somebody in the police noticed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that sergeant saved my life.
Oh, to be honest, but you must have been really struggling. I mean, you're making fun of it, but actually I'm guessing it was quite severe. Did you notice as well, Barry? Did you?
Not that severe, because I think when you come back home, you were sort of a bit lozzy, but not as lozzy as I knew her when we first met.
Yeah.
But she must have been different at work for the police, for the officer or the sergeant, say you need to go to the doctors.
Yeah.
And
so
I went.
Was work bigger then at that point? That was when the stress would come and the bizarre behavior would come, the emotional lability, the depression, the tears and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Well, leading up to that, Barry and I had moved out of our house and we were living with my parents because we were having this house that we're living in now built.
Yeah.
We'd got married. I was in my police training. I was doing the shift work. I had a car accident where I'm lucky to be here. Let's just say that. Yeah. And so I think all of that accumulated and it was just too much stress. But I was around 25, 26. And that's usually when someone who displays, symptoms of bipolar, it does tend to come out around that sort of age anyway. And yeah, I went to the doctors and I said to him, "Look, I don't think you can help me. I've been sent here by my sergeant. This is what's going on." And he said to me, "You're depressed. Here's some antidepressants. I'm signing you off."
That's right.
You could have knocked me down. I said this to him. No, I went, no. I went, no. You don't understand. I don't do depression. That's not who I am.
Right.
I'm happy-go-lucky when I'm sorry, but this is how it is. You're a public servant. You're an important role. I need to look after you. That's what's happening. And I came out of the surgery and I called Barry and I was like, "Baby, you're not going to believe this." And I told him and you were like, "Oh," because mental health was never talked to, like 2000 and...
Yeah.
5,
If
6.
years ago. Yeah, exactly. But it's also, even today, I don't think people understand the symptoms of depression.
No.
You described what was going on, and I'm immediately going, oh, yeah, it's depression. That's fine. We get it. But even today, people don't. They think the symptoms of depression are you feel depressed, which I guess I understand, but it isn't. It's these things. It's the emotional lability. It's the avoidance. It's the triggers. You don't necessarily have to have doom-laden thoughts. You can still be, actually, your thoughts can be okay, but you've got these physiological symptoms. Your sleep is disturbed, all that sort of stuff. Your relationships are disturbed, and so a bit of an education for you. I have a clinical interest in how you responded, because we like taking antidepressants when you're actually bipolar would be contraindicated, because
Wow.
the
Yes,
other
all right.
much more extreme. You must have had a very is that when you had your first high episode on those tablets?
Yes, what I was put on sertraline.
Yeah, well, that would be definitely not what you would want with bipolar. That would, like, when you were saying they gave me antidepressants, I thought, oh, don't take them. My head was like, don't take them. Not if you're bipolar, because it just makes the mania come right out.
Oh, did it just?
I come home from work one day with a £1,500 computer sat on the desk. And I was like, where's that? Oh, I just wanted an Apple. I just wanted this Apple Mac. It's lovely. Look at it. It's fantastic.
Bid, only 1,500. You're lucky, mate. You got off light. Oh,
Yeah.
right. That's what happened, because that is what
Mhm.
would happen if you because you have to medicate both sides of that illness. And so they did diagnose you with depression, and then you suddenly went manic because of those medications. At what point did somebody say, hang on a minute, no, this is actually bipolar, we need to get you off those meds and get you on proper meds?
So it took them from 2005 to 2009 to diagnose me.
Oh,
4 years. 4 years. So
Ow.
I was put under the mental health team because I had suicidal thoughts and I was, harming myself. Not so much slitting my wrists, but I was cutting and I was punching
And
myself
scratch.
and scratching and like physically hitting myself.
yeah.
And that's when they sent me to the mental health team, and then they put me under this watch of, right, what are we, doing? And in February 2009, that's when the psychiatrist pulled me into the office and they said, right, we've got a diagnosis. And they said this to me. They said, I've thought really long and hard about this because this is something that will impact your life forever. And I was like, okay. To be honest with you, I knew what they were going to say. I'm
Yeah.
not stupid. I
Yeah,
looked Mr. Google up. You just feel it, don't you? And that's when they said, we're diagnosing you with bipolar. And I knew about the OCD anyway. And they put me on lithium. That's when they put me on lithium.
Lithium is still the gold standard. It's quite a complicated medication to do. Did you have to get admitted to have your blood tests and all that sort of stuff?
So unfortunately, I'm not on lithium anymore because I had a really bad depression where I decided it was really a good idea that I wouldn't drink or eat anything. And of course, the lithium went toxic and now my kidneys are...
Take it. I know. Complicated medication because there's only, without boring people, you've got to have a certain percentage in your bloodstream, and that percentage changes depending on who you are and various things that take place. If you have too much of it, you go ill. If you're too much, too little. But it's effective. I guess that you take sort of atypical antipsychotics now to manage it or something?
So I take lamotrigine.
Yeah.
And I also take quetiapine, the quick release for the evening.
They can sleep.
Yeah, so I can sleep. Yeah.
And drool everywhere.
But
she's gone.
Yeah.
She's gone.
Well, know about that.
So yeah, I'm on lamotrigine now because I had to come off the lithium. It got toxic in my blood.
Yeah, that's the problem with it. That's the problem.
They threatened to hospitalize me with shock treatment and everything. I remember Professor Hale, who was my psychiatrist, who's absolutely brilliant. I loved him. And he was like, if you don't start drinking any water, then we will admit you. And I remember my mother going, you get out into that room and you drink some water now. And I'm like that. whatever, because I was just so nonchalant and like, I just can't be arsed with all this, but all my veins collapsed in my arms, where I was literally having blood tests every day to test the toxicity because it got that bad for me.
Yeah. Oh dear. Did you get admitted though? Did they section you at all, or did you sort of manage to get treatment out in the community? Right.
Yeah, I got treatment out in the community. I was very lucky. And I think one of the reasons why I never got admitted was because I have such an amazing support network with like my mum and Barry and my friends. I really am very, very fortunate. I had, Barry's mum, who was brilliant. You were brilliant. Got my sister. My sister doesn't even know, but she saved me from not going through with, ending everything, because I had the thoughts come up and I was like, I just need to speak to somebody. And Barry was at work, so I called my sister and just chatted to her. She doesn't even know that narrative was going on in my head. It is just speaking to somebody. I think that's where I've been super lucky.
Worth underlining that point. And, if anybody is feeling this stuff themselves or is triggering, there are support groups out there that help. Samaritans are fantastic. But to people who are on the other side, family and friends and colleagues, that's really important, I think, what you've just said, and we should underline it, because I think a lot of people are afraid about this stuff and they think, oh, well, I don't have the skills, I'm not qualified. But actually, you don't need to be qualified, you just need to listen.
Yeah, and there's an MMA fighter out there, UFC fighter, and he said it best. I think his name's Paddy the Baddie or something like that.
That is a typical fighter name. It's brilliant.
He said, I would rather have a friend cry on my shoulder than go to his funeral the following week.
Oh, that's it.
And
you often don't know when somebody's calling you. You're not even aware that they might be struggling. You don't need to be aware. That's what I'm saying to people. It's the strength of our social connections that saves us. That's what it is. And that's the point that you're making, Laura, is that you had these strong social connections where people were able, they didn't need to be doctor this or doctor that. They just needed to be a mate.
Yeah.
Or they needed to Barry, who was more than a mate. And what was it like for you, Barry? I mean, you must have been. Remember that Maxell advert, the tape advert, the guy who sits in the chair, listens to the music, and he just goes, oh, sort of, I just a bit like that.
And the biggest thing for me, I weren't there to fix Loz, I was there to support her. So I made sure I went to every single doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, every appointment we went to, I'd make sure I go because I want to learn. But also, it's not about fixing somebody, because a lot of people want to do the work for them. I just sat there and listened. Okay. I used my ears more than my mouth, because you can't tell someone what to do when they're in these situations. You just got to be there and listen and just be there.
I was literally saying that to one of my staff today about one of the patients. It's like, because they were getting a bit sad about not having magically transformed this person, healed them. I'm like, no, just be available. They'll step into it when they need it. You do a job for something. Because one of the saddest things I think about mental illness is the loss of the social potential and the isolation and the rejection that takes place. Understandable, because people behave in ways that are frightening or difficult, bizarre, or even downright, angry and aggressive. And I'm sure there was those moments.
Yes, I can have a bit of a temper on me. I have
mania. I mean, it can happen, definitely.
Yes,
but
definitely.
It doesn't have to be you, because what I've seen over the past 10 years or 20 years with Loz is she's learning to manage her symptoms, recognize the symptoms, and rather being a victim to the symptoms, you recognize them and you manage them yourself.
Yeah.
Because you can manage everything, I believe, but you have to understand them and step back from it and say, right, what's going on? Yeah. And put logical, rational reasoning head on it, rather than just going what's going on.
Self-management is the ideal, isn't it? We should also say, and this is true of any sort of severe illness, mental illness, psychiatric illness, that when somebody's ill, they lack insight, and therefore they're not responsible for what, and they can't manage, and they will need specialist help. And I just want to make that point as well, and not to get again, not a political debate, but if you're on medication, stay on it, for goodness sake. Do not suddenly change your medication. Do not listen to TikTok. have a professional team around you. If you really, because there is a reality here, which is some of the medication, and it may have affected you, Laura, I don't know, but some of the medication changes your body shape and things like that. And that can be difficult for some people. And I understand why people want to change things because of that, because that makes them feel more isolated and depressed, and they get negative responses from society and people. But don't just change your meds because of that, folks. Stay on them and talk to your team. Find out how you might be able to adapt it so that you can begin to achieve some of the other goals. I'm not going to, I don't necessarily want to skip over it, but at some point the police say enough is enough, you have to go, here's your pension, right?
Yes, yes. So when we found out I had the diagnosis, you know, I said I wanted my 30-year career in firearms.
Yeah.
Well, there was no way they were giving me a gun.
No, I wouldn't.
No, so do you know what I mean? I couldn't do what I wanted to do.
You were like text, weren't you? Pew, pew, pew.
So
With
yeah.
the in the world.
So I was then taken off shift work. I was then taken off any kind of like ERV where it would be fast response. So I did feel like everything was kind of being taken away from me, and it felt a bit rubbish, to be honest with you. And that's when I decided, you know what, maybe I'll do counterterrorism then, and I'll go in and I'll do that. And I got that post in, and it was great, but I still just I just wasn't well, you know. I was having panic attacks, very jumpy, was still having manias and depressions, and I was having a lot of mixed moods, which is you've probably had patients experience this, where it's kind of like an in-between, which it just feels horrible and mixed for me. And yeah, it was September 2012. We went to the Force medical doctor because I was underneath all of those guys, and he said to me, right, I think it's time.
Yeah.
You either do it or we do it. And I said to Barry, looked at him, and I said, no, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna medically retire myself. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna be in control of this.
Good.
Said,
Good.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. And
yeah.
Huge decision. And I said, right, so I'm just gonna go back to Folkestone. I'll get on my case files. He's like, nope, that's it. You cannot go back into the police station. You go home and you wait for us to medically retire you. And for me, like everyone else was like, oh, lockdown, it's really weird. I'm like, no, because that happened to me in 2012.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I was 9 to 5. I had loads of important things to do. And then it was just taken away from me. And I was like, go home and sit. And I was like, right, well, got 8 hours. When's Barry home?
House was clean.
House was really clean. Like, yeah.
Good for something, right?
Yeah. And then it took them all the way to June 2013 to officially medically retire me. So in that time, from September to June, I was left to contemplate life and what I was going to do. And yeah.
But that's quite a big thing, because any sudden change like that, loss of meaning, purpose, identity. So those are not psychiatric problems, but they are definitely psychological issues for anybody, you know, and to have them. I mean, I would emphasize what you said about taking ownership of it, because you probably reduce some of the pain of it by saying, well, I made this decision. This is my decision. I'm going to work with this. If they'd imposed it upon you, it would have been there plenty of evidence. Studies have shown that people can have exactly the same life circumstances, but one be okay with it, one not be, and the difference is the person who's okay with it feels like they made a decision.
Yeah. And I think also, you know, when, you know, going through the diagnosis and everything, the one big thing that I think has helped me manage it is that I've taken ownership of it. I've never become a victim of it, or, oh, it was because of my bipolar, or it was because of this. It's like, I went on a 32-week course and I learned all about it. I learned about my triggers, my symptoms, and I learned to manage me. Do you know what I mean? So that was important.
That's very much the attitude both of you have. I think it comes across very much, that this idea of self-efficacy, what can I do with what I've got, as opposed to what can't I do? Is that right? Is that the sort of personality types that you are?
100%.
Definitely.
let's not be victims with it. Let's take ownership. Let's take control. And the more important, let's take responsibility.
Yeah.
I think it's that word responsibility is such a powerful word that we can have.
Yeah.
And that puts us back in control.
Yeah. And again, emphasize people, there are times when people are ill and, you know, taking responsibility is not possible because they're ill and they need help. But outside of that time, you can really make good use of your time. And I think of it, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Richmond Fellowship, an amazing organization, I think.
Wow.
They work in mental health, but they have this notion of efficacy and being the best version of yourself that you can be, and this idea that you can be both involved in your own well-being and also ill.
Yeah.
They're not incompatible, and that actually, if you are ill, getting involved in your well-being is an imperative. It's not just a luxurious add-on that you can do at some other point. You really have to do it, and you can achieve well-being even with a diagnosis, even on medication, and even with an illness that comes and goes, because they do. You know, if you're psychotic, even with the best will in the world, you may have an episode, even if you're doing well-being, etc., etc., etc. You know, it happens. It's just the nature of these things. But the well-being stuff becomes imperative to have the best quality of life that you can within your circumstances. And I know this, and I'm going to say it, I don't think you'll mind, but we had booked Barry and Laura to talk previous to this, but Laura got in touch with us and said, no, I'm not in a great space at the moment. I want some time for me. I need to look after myself. And that's it. Absolutely right. Because one should not challenge one's well-being, especially if one has an illness. But even if you don't have one, putting your well-being first is crucial, right?
100%.
Yes, so
and
much.
And that's where our 6 pillars of health and well-being come from Laura's coming through the journey of bipolar and OCD. We come up with our 6 pillars of health, and even if you are unwell, you are on medication, you can still apply the 6 pillars of health and well-being at some level into your life, which will benefit you.
So we're now talking about the formation of your health and fitness company, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this came out of all of this, I guess?
Yes,
100%.
absolutely. So I was medically retired on the 1st of June, 2013.
Yeah.
2nd of June, the very next day, we opened up Rock Solid with a full bill of clients ready to go.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So I'm not stopping.
Rock Solid is a company that provides fitness primarily, but with a much broader holistic understanding of health and well-being and mental health, right?
We started off about body transformations. We started off about the physical body. But as we progress, we've done competitions, we've looked at the physical body. But one thing, you transform the physical body, but this internal dialogue still stays the same. So we are more about health. We're more about well-being nowadays than fitness. Fitness is a movement aspect of what we do, but the majority of it is dealing with our energy levels and our emotional health moving forwards.
Yeah. And the big, drill for us is, helping people with burnout. And what you said, Noel, was so relevant in terms of self-care. I can't tell you the amount of people that we'll speak to in high pressure positions or business owners, and they are neglecting their self-care because they feel guilty. And what they need to understand is that it's a duty of care to look after your self-care.
What they say, the oxygen mask comes down, who's the person you put it on first, right?
Definitely. It's a duty of care. If I don't look after myself, well, which I didn't in 2017 when I hit burnout and we almost lost the business because I had a massive breakdown, right? If you don't take steps each day to look after your mental, emotional, and physical health, you will hit burnout. Your relationships will be jeopardized. You have the potential of losing money. You have the potential of losing your business and your career. And most importantly, you've got the potential of losing your health.
And even if you don't go to that disaster, I know lots of people whose lives have become grey, meaningless, without joy, but they're surviving. I'm sorry, but I don't want that. Do you know what I mean?
We're here to live, not survive.
It does to you, well before you get to the point where you can't function, stress will rob you of color and vitality and joy and pleasure, and life will become an absolute horrific drudge that you force yourself through, and then you get into this crazy narrative in your head where you go, that's amazing, I managed to make myself feel shit again today. It's like,
You know what? I was having this conversation on LinkedIn literally just this morning. So I put a post up saying about how we'd help corporate workers, you know, get out of burnout. And I put purposely, put their phone away, watch some funny movies, connect to a hobby. Do you know what people picked up the most on? Oh, yes, I must put my phone away. And I'm like, you're missing the point.
that's right. You're only putting your phone away so you can do something more interesting and helpful and bright, that brightens your life, right?
Exactly. The point is putting your phone away and having some time for yourself brings joy back to your life. You find out who you are again, not, oh, I'm the banker or I'm the finance expert or whatever. No, you as a person. We have this motto, one life, live it, make it count.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. This is not a rehearsal, folks.
No.
It is. But it's interesting, and I'm always fascinated by this notion of there are some people who face a tragedy, such as the one that you've had as a couple, and you've lived it together as a couple. People will say the identified patient and you're the patient. No, it's not. It's something you both have. Because I know you say this, Barry, but I'm going to say it for you. Barry also has bipolar because Laura has bipolar. That's a fact.
It's in the household, so I have to deal with everything that Loz deals with.
You may not need medication for it, although some days I'm sure you do.
Nice packet of cookies solves everything.
It's that medication we all need every now and then. A little bit of, but it is something you live with together and you manage together. And also, like Barry, you display extraordinarily healthy boundaries and understanding about, I can't fix this, I can only fix me. And if I can focus on me and be well myself, then Laura has a better opportunity to become well herself. Most people do the opposite. They become ill with their patient.
Yeah.
You've seen it, right?
Yeah, I get up early every morning, like 2 hours before Loz does, because she needs to sleep, just solely to focus on my well-being.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
100%, because I know if I'm well, my resilience to deal with anything that comes into our world, because you can't stop things from happening in your world, but the more resilient you are, the better you can cope with them.
Yeah. And also because you deserve a decent life yourself. You're not somebody else's servant.
Some might think so.
Well,
what time's dinner, Baz? What time's dinner?
Conversation elsewhere. It's not for this show. It's true, and I think people need to understand this, that we have a right to feel good about ourselves. We have a right to have joy. We have a right to have happiness. We have a right to do things that we love doing, and we should never give up those rights ever under any circumstances. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, and I think that so many people I know that we work with, it's going to sound really awful, but they might have had oppressive upbringings in terms of, you got to get the grades. If you don't get an A, you're not a person. You're not a good person. You're not this. Work hard, earn the money, and you'll be successful. You'll be happy. You'll be this, you'll be that. And it's almost like, I feel I have to give my clients permission to have fun.
Yes.
It's like they want me to give them permission to have fun, go and watch a movie, laugh till snot bubbles come out. That's what I want them to do, to connect with themselves again. And I just think we're being brought up in this society now where it is all hustle, work. And I can see the shift happening, but I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
But it's interesting. I mean, I was literally talking to a psychiatrist about it the other day, who's going to be a guest on my show as well, about a branch of medicine which our grandmothers and grandfathers would understand. And it's a branch of medicine that has provided the evidence to say, if you eat nutritious foods, if you sleep, if you drink water and hydrate yourself properly, if you have some good mates around you, if you do fun stuff, then you're going to be all right. And it's a whole branch of medicine, I kid you not, which has got the evidence base to say this is how you have happiness and well-being. And those things, which is the stuff that you do in your work, I know, those things, including the exercise, are things that people can do irrespective of what else they're doing in their life. And this is the frustrating thing for me, and it must be for you, in terms of when, and again, I think my profession is partly should be held to blame for this, because we overcomplicate this whole thing about how to achieve happiness and well-being and contentedness. There are a small number of things that we need to do that if we do well and repeat them, we'll be all right. Yeah. You know, so that if we do make sure we work on having loving relationships, make sure we work on our physical health, make sure that we eat nutritious food and reduce the amount of processed stuff and eat less meat and more vegetables, make sure we drink water regularly, make sure we nap, we sleep, make sure that we go out in the park, make sure we go and see films and do stuff that we like. These are really simple things that if we just do them and repeat them, we're actually going to be all right.
Yeah.
Or even if things go messy, we're still going to deal with that, which is the point you're making, Barry. We're going to deal with that better, that mess better. Because we can't control, you know, I can't control Putin invading my country, right?
No.
I can have a relationship to those events that is better for me and means that I deal with them better, and then I get better life outcomes. And there's always this really strange thing, as you point out, Laura, that people are focusing on these goals that somehow are going to give them fulfillment, and they're not. You have to have fulfillment before you get the goals.
Yes, absolutely. You know, one of the things we always do with our guys is we always ask them to set up their intentions for the month.
Right.
And we ask them, you know, what is it you want to create this month, and who is it you want to be? Like, what are you going to show up as? And they might say adventure, they might say joy, they might say happiness, they might say organization. It's like, great, then work from that, you know, perspective.
Really cool. I really like. Did you, when you were at the conference? I mean, it was a long time ago. This conference, it was just after the lockdown, one of the first ones, I think, after the lockdown. Did you two talk about masks as well, or was that somebody else? Might have been somebody else. I don't know if it was you two.
That might have been somebody else, but we might have brought it up. I think we probably brought it up in the actual talk, in terms of, you know, everyone, especially, you know, who's facing burnout. I know I'm having conversations with people on LinkedIn and they're telling me they're absolutely fine. I know they're not.
Yeah.
It's just that they're wearing this mask, do you know what I mean? And we're frightened to drop it.
Yeah. So tell me about burnout. You had an experience, I've had an experience, and you're working with people now. I'm really interested in that because I think there's a lot of it around at the moment. Like I noticed when we went into lockdown, because I've got a long history of mental health problems myself, medication, stuff like that. Because I've got, I don't know if you know ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. It's a thing.
I've not heard of that one, no.
Just Google it. They're called adverse childhood experiences. It's an evidence-based way of measuring how much of a mess you're supposed to be.
Okay.
I score maximum on my ACEs. It's the only time I've got full marks in the whole.
Oh, bless you.
So I should theoretically be a basket case, like one of the kids that you might have met in prison and stuff like that. But I've been very lucky. I've got a lot of help out of life. But also I would say, like you, I'm one of those glass half full people.
Yes. Yeah.
And I do focus on that. And I focus on that side of things, not to a toxic level, but to a side of I'm always looking for what can I do, what responsibility can I take, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think these things are really important. But as I was coming into lockdown, because of my personal history, I knew, and you know, Laura, because of your personal history, and Barry, you know, because you share that personal history, that certain types of life events are going to be challenged, and you better make sure that your supports are better for you. So as we went into lockdown, I got to touch my GP, put myself back on meds and stuff like that, because I knew it was going to be tough. as a prophylactic. My GP said, "Oh, thanks, great, here, take them now, leave me alone."
Yes. Yeah, I just tell my doctor what to do.
Yes, that's like literally. They're talking about self-managing. But then even still during that period of time, I could feel myself going into feeling those early burnout signs of, emotional lability, avoidance, heartbeat racing when I think about stuff, not wanting to open emails, feeling overwhelmed at small issues and stuff like that. So all of those early signs that you're heading that way, and I immediately dialed it down.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I've been burnt out, I'm not going there again. So you tell me from your experience what either your personal experience or what you're hearing now on LinkedIn and how you're helping people.
Yeah, I mean, I know, just very briefly personally for me, I just wasn't taking care of myself. I was externally looking at what everyone else was doing and, thinking, oh, I need to do that to be successful. I need to do that to be successful, working all the hours, and mine hit literally just midnight on a Saturday night, bam, and went catatonic. All I could do was colour in, and that was it.
It is. And it's like that thing, when somebody's back goes out, and the reason their back goes out usually is because they've been picking things up the wrong way for too long.
Yeah.
So eventually just goes, oh, fuck it, I've had enough.
But we've really delved into this, and the way that we work with our clients, and do you know what, we actually saw a massive change, which was really interesting. Okay. So we work on the 3 dimensions, which are physical, mental, and emotional. So if you look at anything that Christina Maslach has done, you'll find that they defined that these were the 3 areas, and there are symptoms and triggers for all different ones. So we have our very own burnout self-assessment. And what was really interesting was, as people were going through lockdown, it was more emotional burnout we were seeing at the highest marks. But now it's more mental burnout afterwards, but we're now starting to see more of a physical burnout in terms of our scores that are coming through. Right. And I think it's really interesting to see what's changing. Yeah. And
that intuitively feels right. Somehow our bodies just hold on and hold on and hold on, don't they? And then they go, oh, I've had enough. And the early warning signs are usually emotional. Of anything. And so people need to take note of them and not just think, oh, I can ignore this, it's just a feeling. Because those emotions are messages.
Yep. And that's what I think what's going on as well. We talk a lot about mental health, but I think the main thing we need to start talking about is emotional health.
I agree.
Because when we talk about mental health, we are looking at outside things like medication and doctors to come along and support us, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. We need that. But I think if we can start talking about emotional health to start with and giving people tools and coping strategies to help their emotions and understand their emotions, we may not have to go down the path of the mental health with the doctors. We're giving these people this control back in their life to understand their emotions, because anxiety
that professional help, the emotional health is often forgotten, as is the physical health. Now, it's really interesting that, and you'll know this, I think, Laura, I mean, you're very interesting as a human being. For me, as a clinician, sorry to objectify you, but you're really interesting to me because the evidence is quite clear that people with severe and enduring mental illnesses, and you have a severe and enduring mental illness, which is top marks. Well done. You've got the top of the score.
I'm so proud of myself.
It doesn't get much more severe and enduring than what you've got. But typically, somebody who has a severe and enduring mental illness will die younger.
Yeah.
Their physical health is wrecked. And it's not because they've got a mental illness. There's no reason in the world why having bipolar should mean that your body is unhealthy. And there's no reason in the world why having bipolar should mean, Barry, that you should feel crappy all the time. It's a perfectly manageable thing and can be managed And then what? And it's like, it's really interesting. As we've been talking, one of my patients was messaging me going, I've done all this. Come on, you're going to give me this now. And I'm aware that this person is sad about their life.
Yeah.
And of course they're sad about their life, because what's happened to them is prototypically what happens to anybody with severe and enduring mental health problems. They end up in mental health services that only focus on making the medication levels correct and nothing else about what makes life worth living.
100%.
Yes.
100%.
Really interesting to me as a couple and as an individual, because you've focused on what makes life worth living and you've made your life something worth living. Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah. I mean,
What else is there to do with life than make it worth living?
I feel we're
Yeah.
all,
Don't they? They forget. I mean, they literally put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, all this other stuff is the horse. The cart is find out your meaning and purpose and do it on purpose. And like you said, if it can be really short-term stuff like, what do you want to be this month? Well, I want to be excitement this month. Okay, be excitement.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, isn't it? There's a literal truth in that. So we are probably have run over time because we've had such an interesting ranging. Let's see if anybody's still listening at this point. But so how do people get hold of you if they want to work with the sort of rock solid stuff in terms of the 5 pillars that you work with, or with the burnout stuff in terms of the 3 sort of areas that you work on in terms of helping people get back to a meaningful, purposeful life, and importantly, do this stuff while still functioning in the real world?
Definitely.
100%.
So the best way, we have our website, which is rocksolidhealth.co.uk. Come and check us out on there, and you'll see Energize Leadership on there, which is the program about burnout, and you'll see the Health Academy and other ways that you can work in terms of, you know, getting your health foundations in place. Come and find me on LinkedIn, Laura Ash or Barry Ash. You can't miss us. And we have the burnout self-assessment that you can take on there, which is completely free to take.
Yeah.
It will take you less than 2 minutes. And it'll ask you questions based on how you've been feeling over the past 2 to 4 weeks. And then based off of that, it will give you a reflection of where your energy levels might be at, emotionally, mentally, and physically. And we've had about 700 people do it. And I would probably say about 99% of them have said that the results are startlingly accurate.
There we go. And the first step to getting well is understanding what the problem is.
It's accepting and acknowledging,
Yeah.
isn't it?
We have a
I mean, is these self-help questionnaires actually help clarify the issue for people. And particularly if we self-diagnose in that way with an expert help, we start to think, okay, that's the issue. This is the scope of it. And this is what I'm going to do. Look, fantastic to have you both. I've got to go because I've got to jump in the shower, and then I've got to get to the gym and go and do my leg day and my core day. So
Lovely.
I've been avoiding that, as we all do. Leg day is never fun, but there you go. I did my kickboxing this morning before this, which is why I need a shower. So luckily this is not live, otherwise. Just before that, I also did my toning and fitness class. And these things are really important to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really important to me. I do at least 2, usually 3 or 4 fitness activities every single day.
Wow.
nice.
That's good. Yeah.
I have to, because I am a person at high risk of being ill.
Mhm.
And I invest in being well, you know,
Yes.
and that's so important. And I would encourage people to get hold of Barry and Laura. They've worked for me as well, not just been on my show. They've come and met some of my patients and done extraordinary work for me at sort of inspiring people who are in very dark places to think, it can change. So great inspirational leaders in every way, I think. All right. So gonna see, I don't know, I'll see you real world at some point. I'm going to say goodbye for now. So fantastic to have you both on. And then I hope everybody enjoyed the show. And goodbye for now.
Bye.
See you.